one of the key points I work with executives on, what's your passion? What really excites you? What's your runway? Meaning your ability to survive. So some executives have the luxury of saying, it's whatever time it takes. And then others saying, the other end of the continuum, I need to find something quickly. And sometimes that quickness drives some behaviors that some folks are lucky in that they land in line, or sometimes there's a compromise just in the sake of getting something quickly. And then there's all those variations in between. So that's a pretty important practical consideration. And to that end, one third consideration, should I leave my job as I look for my next opportunity? And one of the points of advice, in most circumstances, it's often easier to find your next job when you're employed. There are some extenuating circumstances, but if possible, try to maintain that. But there's many other questions, and I'll defer to Harriet, who I know fields many of those as well when she does her coaching.
Harriet, if we could, I'm sorry, please.
Go ahead, please, Tony.
No, I was going to take the question and just kind of shift it a bit in a different direction, because Mark said something I felt we should riff on a bit. So if you're between roles, my question for you is, if you're between roles, are you more likely to make a better decision than, rather a more hasty decision than someone who's in role and has the luxury of income as well as possibly time, and as Mark put it, a runway? Do they decide differently, in other words, based on their career stage?
Yes, and you and I are telepathically communicating, because as Mark was speaking, I was thinking of a retired lieutenant colonel that I coached, who had a very senior security role with the Defense Department. And he was going to retire from the Army, not because of the work itself and what he brought to that work, which was a tremendous amount of value given his expertise and experience, but just because of the realities of the day-to-day trying to get the work done. I think we would call that corporate politics, but who knows what it gets translated to at the Pentagon. But in any event, because of that retirement agreement, he was not able to, in essence, have military clients, if you will, for at least 1 year. And he had no idea what he wanted to do. Now, fortunately for him, he was also an adjunct professor at Georgetown, which he'd done for years. Very curious individual, but full of information and ready to explore the world. I mean, keep in mind, he'd been in the military for his entire career. Very successful on, active duty as well as office jobs, if you will. So we began to explore a number of different things. He was extremely effective in networking and had quite the portfolio of individuals he could turn to. And, it made sense for him to continue the work, but the question became how to continue the work. Did it mean taking a civilian position in the government? Did it mean hanging up his consulting shield, as Sandra mentioned? Did it mean joining a think tank? Many of those are nonprofits who kind of do the behind the scenes work to develop strategy, if you will. Or should he do something entirely different? So he was interviewed by some very well-known firms who consulted with the government, but he wasn't in a position to be hired, nor was the salary anywhere near what they thought. They were stuck in, well, you don't have any corporate experience, which was insane, because he actually brought a lot more value than having corporate experience. But so he negotiated 2 independent contracts for short-term projects like Mark mentioned. He quickly formed an LLC, named them after his two parrots, their initial, and went about doing this consulting engagement, or engagements, plural. And lo and behold, once that agreement with the government expired, one of them did make him an offer at that point with substantially more in terms of his base salary, opportunities for bonuses and so on, because now he's gone in, proven his value, worked with the cultures of both organizations, and made a very criteria-based decision about what fit was best for him, and therefore could go forward. So sometimes the crossroad means doing something a bit differently than looking for a role, and figuring it out as you go. I'll be quiet here, but one funny story was, and I thought he was kidding, honestly. So he lived in London at one point, and his wife is all things about the royal family. And she got a email from, I don't know, some publication she follows, that at the time, Prince Harry and Princess Kate were looking for a chief of staff. But if you read the role, it was a lot of what he did. And so he sent it to me. He said, do you think there's any way they would consider me for this role, not being of British heritage? And I said, I have no idea. But we figured out who the consultant was. It was the recruiter was published, and he ended up connecting with the Washington, D.C. recruiter for that company. Not just about that, but about other things as well. So you never know what's going to come across that opens your eyes to something completely different.